Heyo, welcome everyone to Stay in the Scene by Indie Arcade Wave. I'm Joe, your host, and here on the scene we dive into what's happening in the arcade space, from new arcade developers, arcade owners, and operators, and just news in the space in general. Now, I helped create Galactic Battleground about 5 years ago. We've been taking it to conventions all over the country and showing it off. And we've got a new game that we want to announce today. We have a few people with us to talk about that, and someone that got us into the door to start with, we've been working with for years. So I'm just going to bring them all in and then we can announce what the game is. So I've got Dylan Davis, Bryan Armitage, and Kelly Pangburn with me, two members of Slackerz, and then the owner and operator of Paradise Arcades. How you doing, Bryan?
Hey, good. Good to see you, Joe.
Kelly, Dylan, how you guys doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
I'm
Glad to
good.
be here.
Yeah, glad to have you guys back on. I mean, we talk all the time, so this isn't like a crazy meeting, but I'm excited to announce that we have a new game coming out called Food Fight Frenzy. It is an Atari license, and it is a four-player version of Food Fight, which is kind of comical to me actually, because the first MGC we ever went to, we were all kind of joking with Tony from DeathBall about how funny it would be to make a game called Food Fight before we really were on this idea, but of just throwing food at people's faces and like feeding them until they explode, basically. And now we're actually working on the Atari license of Food Fight, which is awesome. So let's
hmm
just have you guys introduce yourselves, kind of tell people who you are and what you do.
I'll go first. Kelly Pangburn, co-founder of Slackerz-Inc. Been writing code since I was in high school, basically, whether it was basic to Visual Basic to uh, C++. Did some assembly language in there, all the way up into building mobile apps for a living. But uh, started the side project of Galactic Battleground with Dylan, and met a lot of great people along the way, and got to meet Bryan and start talking about Food Fight, and this is how we got here today.
So, I'm Bryan Armitage. I don't know, was it 15 years ago about started Paradise Arcade Shop over in Hawaii when I was in residency. And since then, it's just kind of been a crazy ride of selling parts, designing parts, and more recently going out and licensing old games. And so our first license out of the gate that we got was Tato Ice Cold Beer. And the second one was a series of two games. Hopefully, it'll be expanded to a few more that we're discussing right now. With Atari, the first being Warlords, and the second being Food Fight Frenzy.
Hey guys, I'm Dylan Davis, and I work for Slackerz-Inc. I am the creative director and game designer of all the games that we play and make. And I just started making art when I was 12 and haven't stopped since.
Awesome, awesome. So now everybody knows kind of who you are. I think I've had everybody on the show before. For anybody that hasn't seen them, we've got other episodes. I'll link those in the description. But let's figure out where we started. So obviously Bryan was our connection here. Bryan knew Atari. I still don't exactly know how you got in touch with Atari. So let's figure that out right now. So tell us how you got connected with Atari and why you chose to work with Slackerz-Inc.
Yeah, the story with Atari is actually kind of crazy. I started that. Whew, I think I first reached out to them prior to COVID, and I was trying to get permission to do Warlords. I met with them out in Vegas, sat down, we went through a bunch of stuff, and then they just ghosted me. They absolutely disappeared for years. And so they had an evolution of their company, and Wade Rosen joined the team, who's a huge classic arcade fan and console fan. And I joined up with Tom Kogan, who's the other partner of Retro Arcade. And Tom is a guy. When we got the ice cold beer license, I said to him, "Hey, we should see if we can get Tato on the phone and see if we can do ice cold beer. It'd be pretty fun to do. It's a great electromechanical game." And I expected it to take him like 3 or 4 months. And like the next week, he calls me back and says, "Hey, I've got a meeting with Tato in Japan on the phone next week. Can you make it?" And so after we got the Tato license, I said, "Why don't you see if you can get Atari? They ghosted me years ago." And within like 3 weeks, he's got their licensing on the phone, and it just went from there. And Cassandra's great. I mean, it was no hard feelings about what happened. It just was different stages of company development. But when we went into this next stage and Tom was working with them and we were talking about these different games, we really started with something that was relatively simple. Uh, Taking or trying to launch a few games, license some artwork, and do some different things. And it's really grown into a rather prolific relationship. We do PCBs with them, we do art with them, and then we do these two games. So Warlords was the first one, and that's an exact replica of Warlords because that was just a great 4-player game as it is. There's a few things that we've added in there for speeding it up a little bit and increasing the throughput, but aside from that, it's pretty much a reproduction of the original. And then Food Fight, and Food Fight's a game that I have always loved playing, but it lacked that interactivity that is a lot of fun with your friends. And so that was where this evolution to let's make a 4-player version of Food Fight that's competitive, cooperative, it's just kind of a neat way of doing it. We had worked with Slackerz on the Galactic Battlegrounds project years ago. And it's interesting to watch people over time. I know when we started Paradise, I didn't know half the stuff I know now, even a quarter, tenth the stuff I know now about parts and games and everything else. And so watching you guys grow throughout time and talking to you about kind of game concepts and what you're seeing in games and things, I really thought it'd be a good partnership. You're local, we're able to do some testing back and forth, and seeing some of the things that you were looking at in games and noticing the attractive aspects of those games, I thought it'd be a great combination with what you had learned from your projects moving forward with Food Fight Frenzy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've done a lot of testing, a lot of a lot of testing, trialing and erroring, meeting with people, actually seeing people playing in front of us and getting an idea of what the player actually wants. And our recent Texas trip that Kelly and I took, we were in 12 arcades in 14 days, like really there, like in the space where these games are, where these games are making profits, talking to the owners, like having a feel of what the owners want, but also what the players want. So we were able to bring that to you, and we're super excited to work on Food Fight. Let's talk about the development side of it. So I know you mentioned, Bryan, that the Warlords game was pretty much just like a reproduction of what it already was. You had somebody come in and kind of rewrite the code a little bit so that it was 4-player friendly. Because if I'm right, the original game only had 2 players and then 2 AI, right?
Actually, no. So the original game was 1 to 4. Actually, the original Warlords was 1 to 4 players with AI in the cocktail version, and
Okay.
was 2 players in the upright version with 2 AI.
Okay.
The upright cabinet is by far one of Atari's best cabinets ever. 25-inch black and white with like color overlays and a 3-dimensional castle behind it. So only remembering that one is definitely the one to remember.
Right.
But
It's far more common too. I feel like you see it way more than the cocktail.
it comes up. Actually, the cocktails are usually squirreled away in people's houses.
Right. Okay.
But it's the cocktails are really what a lot of people in the community, and this is, we looked at this like ice cold beer, common but breaking all the time. Warlords, hard to get your hands on a cocktail, and like an original Warlords cocktail is going for $3,000 to $5,000 now. So there's this desire to have it, and I mean, here's a classic 4-player game that a lot of the arcade bars can't get. And
Right.
so, bringing that back to them is kind of one of those goals.
And even having a new version of it that's in a similar price point as finding the old one.
Right. And so the new version really is the same guy who did like the code sets for a number of other commercial relaunches over the last 15 years is doing the code for this. And so it's a developer, I won't get into a lot of the details on that, but who's done this before in this capacity. And really what we're doing on it is just adding more fireballs, speeding up a little bit, letting it be a little bit more competitive. So in a, I think our attention spans have decreased over the last 40, 50 years. So if a game doesn't get moving within the first 30 seconds, we're like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And so that just introducing a little bit more of the speeding up the progression of difficulty on it. But aside from that, it's really down to a lot of the details, very much the original.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, with like what I was getting at with the development of it, Kelly started this from scratch. Like Food Fight Frenzy is like
Yep.
from scratch. basically using the original food fight as a template, and we're building off of it, kind of trying to keep it very similar. So what was developing that like for you, Kelly? Like just getting nothing from Atari to start other than the original game and just working at it.
It was definitely a challenge. Food Fight isn't really a game you see very often in arcades right now. Like, I heard of it before Bryan approached us, but I wasn't really too familiar with it. I remember, I remember the day Bryan, it was at MGC in Milwaukee, and he came to us and was like, "Hey, I have a potential game that I need developed, and would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd be interested." And then he told me Food Fight, and I was like, "What?" and I was like, "Yeah." And so then I immediately went in and started researching Food Fight and just trying to figure out how the game mechanics worked, what made it fun. I think and Bryan can keep me honest on this, Food Fight's been kind of a cult classic now amongst the collectors out there, and they're kind of coveted machines right now that for those that have them. Um, and the biggest thing that Food Fight has is going for it is the special joystick that Atari made for it. So I'm going to give a little bit of background history on it. Like they made a joystick that was basically 360 degrees, like stuff that we take for granted right now in the Xbox controllers and things like that. Like standard arcades are 8-way, it's up, down, left, right, and then 4 corners. They came out with a joystick that was 360, which you think that would be easy, but they did a lot of nuances with that joystick that they used to their advantage, like being able to like go a little bit to the left or right, so you can change your throwing angle versus moving and stuff like that. So when you get on certain special piles of food, you can literally become a turret basically and try to do things. And coincidentally, one of the AIs is that's their goal, is to basically be a turret. That's their persona. So it was the challenge was just getting the controls down first, and I spent a lot of time on the Xbox version. Actually, Atari came out with a 50th anniversary Xbox release, basically, and had all their games on their library through the years. And I played a lot of it on my Xbox and trying to figure it out. I learned really quickly that I was terrible at Food Fight. Food Fight's a very difficult game. It looks when you look at it on the like the video, and you watch this guy go from like level 1 to like 100. It makes it look so easy, and wasn't the case when I first played it. And so I learned very quickly that this game does have some depth in there that isn't really obvious to the observer without watching it, and by just watching it actually play the game and experience it. So I was very concerned about making sure I give it its due justice as far as that goes. Make sure the controls feel very, very similar to what they were today, if not exactly the same. I'm working with Bryan on potential joystick solutions and things like that, but we've got a good prototype as far as the controls go. Then the other part was getting the chef's AI. The chef's AI is kind of pretty straightforward. And then the other part was we're developing since it's 4 players, and this is something we experienced in Galactic Battleground through the years, and we kind of learned a lot through Galactic Battleground, is the best experience is to just jump right into the 4-player experience, no matter how many human players you have. So we went through it and basically created AI. I created AI. The difference between Galactic Battlegrounds, it was easier because you just went left and right. That was it. So you only have 2 directions to go. You can either chase after the opponent or run away from danger or things like that. This one is, 4 dimensions or 2 dimensions basically. So up and down, left, right. And so I had to learn a little bit more about pathfinding. Pathfinding is, there's plenty of documentation out there, but I had to kind of go to school a little bit on that to actually figure out the pathfinding. Like when the AI is in trouble, where's the path to get out of trouble? When the AI needs a piece of food, where's the path to the quickest piece of food? When the AI wants to go throw at somebody, what's the best path to get in front? And also, some of the AI, leads better than other, like kind of try to predict which way the guy is going. So I feel like I made the AI too good at first. I remember when Tom and Bryan first saw it, they're like, "Can we make this not so tough?" I was like, "Yeah." So I kind of did made it not so tough, so they gave the guys a little more persona. So each one of the characters have a little bit more of a personality now, and you can kind of pick your personas you want to fight against basing on which controller you select. So if you're going to be player 2, for example, you're going to take over the character that normally just sits there and tries to get on a piece of food and be a turret all day. So I kept the original character Charlie Chuck as the hardest guy to play against because I thought that was kind of homage to him a little bit. Like he should be the baddest one of all of them, I thought. So his code is kind of still intact from when Bryan and Tom first faced him, but he's the only one. It's not 3 of him; it's only 1 of him. So it's not quite so bad. Another challenge. I'm kind of going through all the different challenges that we had that I ran into, but another challenge is to try to make sure the game lasts long. So food fight, you're basically on a 2-dimensional board and you're trying to figure out how to get, the right value for their investment in the game, because we want them not to feel like this was like over in 10 seconds and they don't want to play anymore because they just got destroyed by the computer or something like that. But you also don't want it to last like 10 minutes on 1 quarter per person. So we'd strike a delicate balance on that, and ran into what we usually call just balancing of the boards, so to speak. So we put in mechanics in the boards to try to make the games longer, putting dividers between people, things you can't throw through, things like that. Like the old, we had the very first board is the wide open, just 2-dimensional space. That's it. There's nothing stopping you between chefs and players and food except open air. And that's the very first board that you play. Then the subsequent boards, we kind of throw a lot more dividers and just make you have to kind of figure out where you want to go and things like that. So that was a challenge, and I'm kind of getting in the weeds a little bit. But the second challenge was just the moving from on my personal computer to our production computer. I ran into an issue with throwing and picking up. Like Unity was acting a little weird. I built it using Unity, and that's the package I'm used to, and it's been serving me very well so far. And there was a glitch, or I would say, like between picking up and throwing the food. If you're standing on a food pile and you try to pick up at the same time. That works okay on my computer, but on Unix or Linux, it was actually being a little weird. And long story short is when I threw a piece of food, I had to tell the game or the computer saying, wait at least till the next frame before you can pick up a piece of food. And that was just like, felt weird I had to do that, but people are not going to notice that because you get 60 frames per second. So that's like a microsecond that the character's waiting to pick up the next piece. So they're none the wiser, but the fact that I had to go in that depth and like figure that out and stuff like that. So it's been quite a ride as far as like making sure the game is fun. That's the most part. If it's not fun, I was going to play. Make sure the game lasts long, but not too long, so that they want to keep playing. Making sure the controls are just as good as the original creators, because I have a huge respect for the original creators. They're the same guys that made Miss Pac-Man too, and making sure the arts and nostalgia is still there. Like we could have went off onto the deep end, and Dylan can get on the art side of things a little bit, but we could have went and tried to make this, high graphics, high resolution game. But we kind of try to stay true to the classics. Like we want to be playing the games that we love, but just modernly made, but classically inspired. So like the graphics are intentionally like 8-bit or 16-bit, if you will, just to make sure that we still feel like it's part of the arcade experience. And that's a very important to us, that people see that we are paying homage to quite basically an art era that we lived and growing up with. Bryan and myself did anyways, and Dylan, he's obviously younger, but he has much respect for it, and so he's a big Galaga fan. For example, he beat the high score on this one right here, so I have to beat the high score there now to get that back. But Yeah, it was quite a development ride, and I've learned more since I started this project. I thought it was quite honest. I thought it was going to be a little bit easier than I thought, but actually, the more I got into, it, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to figure out some of the other things I didn't have to in Galactic Battleground. So it's been fun, and now we're just that much better now at game development, which is all I can really ask for.
I think
Yeah.
one of the things that you hit on, Kelly, that's really important is the classic games really, like, the graphics were kind of groundbreaking in some ways, in the concepts they did, the time, the way they presented the graphics. They did a lot of neat stuff when they were released. What made the games entertaining, though, was the gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't really need flashy stuff to make a game interesting if you have the right game. You know, it's like, do you do a movie with a lot of CGI effects, or do you do a good movie? And like, there's a place for both of them. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
you know, great games that are just a lot of flash and they're fun because they're like popping things in your face all the time. But
Sure.
you know, that's one style, and like the classic style is much more about a theme or a strategy, or like a way, game mechanics that are entertaining regardless of the format they're in.
You know, figuring out the patterns is a big thing in the old classic games. Like, you don't even realize you're playing against a pattern sometimes, but that's part of the fun of, like, you know, figuring out how to beat the system. Basically, that's what everybody wants to do. You know.
Yep. And like him or not, if you ever get a chance to watch Billy Mitchell play
Mm-hmm.
Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man, it's
Oh
just
God, yeah.
It's muscle
unbelievable.
memory. He
It's like
he just knows exactly where they're going to be
Mm-hmm.
at all times.
he can
Yeah.
sit there and talk to you, not
Yeah.
even look at the
Yes.
screen, and play, and it's just like, you know, you get,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of Billy Mitchell haters, and that's fine. It's not, this isn't an assessment of him or what he's done from those respects. But if you ever have a chance to see it, like,
Yeah.
his ability to understand the patterns in that game is, I've never seen that anywhere
Yeah.
else.
The
And
dude
it's
Yeah,
can
I've
just
play.
cool.
I've seen
Yeah.
him on Pac-Man. I've seen him on Donkey Kong. Like he just knows. Like
Yep.
it's like he's telling the game how to respond, not the game telling him how to respond.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. It's like he knows what the game's gonna do before the game knows what it's gonna do.
Exactly.
And that is, but that is one of the things about, you know, classic games only had so much room and memory to do things, and so you had
Mm-hmm.
to figure out a strategy for how to make them work without having kind of you couldn't just add like another thing. You had a limited amount of memory space,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
processing power, and other things that you had to make something that engaged people and made them enjoy. And that's one of the things I think that's fascinating about them, because you don't, you really, you know, the modern games, and there's some modern games I love, and there's some themes I love, but like there's an element to classic gameplay, and then understanding it, understanding that, you know, like Kelly had mentioned, that it's an integration of the controller and the game, and like it was really about an experience. And the guys that I've had to talk to that were there at the time that developed some of these games, they really, you know, like Berserk is a easy game on a good joystick. It's a joke on
Mm-hmm.
a good joystick. So they chose this joystick that's terrible, and the game's hard and it's fun, you know. And it's kind of funny. Like, you think, like, you chose a joystick that didn't work as well. Yeah, it was too easy if you used a good joystick. All right, makes sense.
I mean, that's one way to add difficulty to a game without actually coding in difficulty. You just make the mechanics harder. So, Dylan, let's talk about art.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the art process that you had here. What did you get from Atari? Was it like from scratch? Did you get some of the stuff in there?
So Bryan sent me a bunch of art in a Google Drive, and it was basically the core sprite sheets. So this one is the core. It's basically the entire game from Charlie all the way down to the food, like every single little bit of animation. Granted, like we didn't use all of this, but we used some of it. Kelly used this to like as a basis graphic for developing. But when I was recreating the art, I had to use this top part with all these parts and basically just recolored skins to make it, you know, playable. And then we got into the part where we wanted to make different genders, so I added a ponytail, but I also didn't want to make it too big, so it was like distracting. But as is anyway, like when you eat ice cream cone, you can see these people just nomming everything. And again, like what Kelly said earlier too, is just taking the classic art and trying to recreate it without taking away the authenticity of it. And like I also had to recreate this entire menu screen from scratch, and I like learned how to animate a little bit, a bunch of little learning curves here and there, and I saw some like resolution issues with some of the art that we had previously, and like just figuring out little like nuances here and there. But like also like this is like similar to the old one, but not really. I'm having it like splat and dribble and
Yeah,
um
it's important to know Dylan had to make that yellow food fight from scratch. Like we didn't get that art. Like he had remade that food fight title and then added the frenzy next to it, and it looks
I try
amazing.
I tried to like make it as close as I possible to like how funky and weird the font is in general. I mean, like again, the art on the game is not the same to the art on the cab, and it's just like a little bit confusing, but either way, like the art on the cab is also amazing. I actually have it right here, but like these are all just like little renditions I did, but like this is the original. So I had to recreate this whole thing because some of the little parts in it weren't as crisp as they could be. And when you image trace of scanned art, it doesn't get every single little speck of dots because of DPI, and according to print. So like I had to make do with what I had to do, and I spent a long time just trying to make something cool and try to my best to like copy fonts and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's just a big learning curve, and it's been really fun. And I also like want to shout out to like Galactic Battleground. Like I have 2 books here. I don't know if you can see. This book helped me get inspired by like any cab arcade. And then I got this book recently called Supercade, and it's the history from 1971 to 1984, which is basically the golden age of arcades. And it has like all these like beautiful illustrations, perfect for people who don't like to read. So if you're ever interested in just drawing shit, go ahead, like use those books.
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see like all the stuff that you got from Atari and how we kept it as authentic as we possibly could to the old game, but bringing in that new flair, like Kelly said, retro inspired, modern designed, keeping it Slackerz Inc., but also still Atari. And we're gonna be showing this off for the first time at Midwest Gaming Classic, which we've been going to for 5 years, 6 years now. It's been I don't know how long Brian's been going, but for sure at least 5 years for us. And we love the convention. Super excited to show it off there. Shout out Dan, amazing guy. Thanks for everything you've done for us and the rest of the indie arcade community. Why, like, I guess I'm curious for everybody's perspective. Like, why do you like MGC so much, and why do you keep going back?
For me, it's the people that come there looking to try something different. MGC is a great place to test a concept. Like it's kind of similar to Can Wonderland, where people just try anything that they come across, and uh, tremendous amount of feedback, and it's a very popular event. It feels like it's growing every year, a little bit bigger, with Stern's presence there and indie arcades showing up. They're very friendly to indie arcades. Like there's not many conventions that'll basically like help you out when you're an indie arcade developer. Like a lot of them will charge a super large fee and just to get in and stuff like that. Where Dan has been kind of like, you guys, I know you guys need help, so I'm here to help you. And Dan Lutzen's been amazing at that. Um, it's still expensive just to get cabinets down there and lodging and all that stuff, but the biggest thing is Dan's support and the the people that show up that just are wanting to play, and they're not afraid to walk up and try things. And it's testing that we can get without actually have to pay like 100 people to come through and walk through and stuff. And so it's really kind of, every time we go there, I feel like we figure out something better to do to our game, and something that I'm like, wow, it'd be smart if we just change our menu to do this, or if we change this mechanic to do this, it's going to be better. And it's almost always worked out that way when we leave MGC with like new work to do that we know we want to make the game better.
Yeah, you're usually working in the car, leaving MGC, going back to Minneapolis. Like you're already rewriting the code, fixing the stuff that we figured out. What do you think, Brian? Why do you keep going back?
I the first MGC I went to was still at the old hotel, and there was like a brew pub next door, and all the collectors would bring games, would then go over to the brew pub, bring all the growlers back, and I don't remember the end of those evenings. We had a lot of fun. The event has really changed over time. It was kind of this like party for collectors, and it's become I say it's become more of a con now. But the thing that really has stayed consistent, and as you guys have pointed out, is Dan has really been absolutely dedicated to the promotion of arcade games and indie developers, and exposing kind of this hobby to the larger community. So some of that collector vibe has left a little bit, which I be honest, I miss. But in exchange for that, you're now getting a much larger audience, and people are getting to see games and getting to see this indie development who normally wouldn't be exposed to it. And it really is bringing that to the masses. And then, like you said, I mean, Dan has just always been incredibly generous and incredibly driven to promote people and ideas and like concepts. Paradise has gone a few years, and to be honest, it just isn't a convention where we do very well. It's just not. There's not a lot of sales that we have, so bringing the store down there isn't worth it. When we talked to Dan about that, he basically said, "Look, if you want to come hang out and chat with people, bring some stuff, put on a table. I'll find a place for you," which is wonderful. Because if you go down, I think the last time we actually brought stuff down to sell from Paradise, I think we sold like $200 the whole weekend. And I joke that it's more a chance for me to go and be at a table, and everybody has to come to me and talk. And it's a great. I like it because it's the support of the community, and two, it really is a chance to catch up with a lot of people who don't get to see very often.
Yeah, and I want to shout out, like you were talking about with like all the indie games and everything, the pinball. They have like usually like 12 to 20 like homebrewed pinballs that you don't find anywhere else, and it's always really cool to see that stuff. Like the homebrewed stuff, I don't even want to consider the idea of making a pinball. Like after seeing Kelly fix that pinbot behind him, like that looks like a headache and a half. I don't want to deal with that, so we'll just stick to the arcade stuff. But it is really inspiring for me to see like one person take on a task like that. Like making a whole pinball is nuts.
You're right. It's incredible to see them do that. The one I will say, the one thing that I miss about the old ones is that people brought all these prototype games. Like they brought all this rare stuff. I'm not prototype, but like rare games. Like the first one I went to, I remember playing Sonic on a candy cabinet, three-player trackball. There was a reactor there, a Major Havoc. I mean, all these games that you just don't normally get to play. And so it has become, and a lot of the other neat thing about MGC now is there's a lot of the big companies are using it as announcements or launches for their games, which is fun to get to see them the first time there as well.
I'm sure we'll see a lot of Jaws there this year from Stern.
I'm excited, playing a bunch of Jaws. How about you, Dylan? Why do you keep going back?
Honestly, dude, a blast from the past. I get to play in Halo tournaments and look at all these new games and look at the auction, even though I can't buy anything. I usually just like nudge Kelly, like, "Hey, dude, you should get that one, man." But yeah, just pure nostalgia, and if I can make it out, it's just a good little weekend to go hang out and play some video games.
Yeah, it's a super fun spot. If you haven't been, highly recommend you go. It is in a week, so figure it out, I guess. We'd love to see you there. We'd love to have you play the new game. And that's really all I had for everybody. So thanks for coming on, everybody. And then I'll just pass it off for social media links. Let's start with Bryan for anything you want to shout out.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you guys helping out with the game, doing the programming, and really looking forward to this. Thanks for having me on tonight. And if you need any arcade parts, check out Paradise Arcade. And if you're looking for a nice cold beer, a Warlords, or a food fight, check out RetroArcadeRemake.com.
Awesome. And then for us, it's basically Galactic Battleground anywhere, just any social medias. Indie Arcade Wave, any social medias. We'll be covering all this stuff. I'll be filming at MGC as well as showing off the new game and other games we made and all the other indie games that are going to be there. Definitely some homebrewed pinballs too, because I'll be playing more of those this time. But again, thank you everybody for coming on. Appreciate your time. Glad we were able to work on this game. Thank you, Bryan, for giving us the chance to work on an Atari game.
Thanks, Brian.
That's pretty sick that we can say we did that now. And for anybody that's still watching, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton. The way we'll continue to grow and we can all ride it together. The t-shirts are on the website on Galactic Battleground, as well as the Galactic Battleground cabinets, the 4-player tabletop, and Konami. And soon you'll be able to buy Food Fight as well from Bryan, like he said earlier. And until next time, peace.